The second segment of the show today, we're talking to Alana McLaughlin, and she's talking about child abuse and neglect. And she gave us some information during the first segment dealing with her background in education, as well as the classic example of what many people consider to be the classic example of the Charles Lindbergh case. And now she will give us some additional information. And of course, Lana, let's continue our discussion in reference to child abuse and neglect. Why don't you give me some examples of what you consider to be child abuse and neglect?
Well, I want to go far back to 1813. I'm sure nobody watching this will remember this, but in 1813, Anne Poole and her husband James Poole were at home sleeping when their daughter Margaret Poole was kidnapped by Nancy Gamble with the help of Marie Thomas. Now, the next morning they discovered that Margaret was not in her crib. So they went to the Baltimore, the newspaper, and then they went to that, and then they used their publicity of the kidnapping to help spread the word about Margaret's disappearance. Later, over 2 months later, on May the 1st, the same year, they found Margaret in a creek. She had been brutally whipped by Gamble, but it also killed her for she had broken bones and a skull fracture. Mm-hmm. Now, the next case I would like to talk to is a case I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. It's called the Lisa Irwin case. Now, it's still open, and now Lisa Irwin and her mother, Debbie Irwin, and her father, James Irwin. James Irwin left for his work at approximately 5:40 on October the 5th. Now, Debbie, the mother, was still at home with her two sons, Michael Irwin and Bradley Irwin. Now, they were home, and so they decided to have dinner with a neighbor, for their father was gone. So they invited the neighbor, and as the mother, at approximately like 6:40, the mother was making dinner for the neighbor and her two sons. Okay, so when the boys got done eating, they went to go watch a movie, so it was only Debbie and the neighbor. Debbie admits she had several glasses of wine and she felt a little drunk, so she went to bed. So when James came back home at 3:45 a.m. the next day, he went to the master bedroom, and apparently Michael had had a nightmare, so he was in the master bedroom, and Bradley explained everything that happened. So Michael was in the master bedroom with his mother, Debbie. So he went to baby Lisa's room, which they called her Pumpkin Pie. So he went to Pumpkin Pie's room, and apparently he saw that she was not in her crib, but her favorite stuffed animal, Barney, was still in her crib, and her bottle was on the floor. James started to panic, and he woke everybody up. Then he called the 911 on a work phone that he used, and as soon as the police arrived, 50 men searched the woods approximately behind their house, and 50 other men searched all the house. So Debbie took a lie detector test and she failed, but they didn't give James a test for, they verified his whereabouts. So my theory is that the neighbors probably had something to do with this, because they left out, they didn't say where the neighbors were when Debbie went to bed. The two boys, before Debbie started making dinner, she put Lisa down because she was a bit fussy that day. So my theory is that the neighbors really had something to do with it, because they didn't say the neighbors' whereabouts during when all this happened. So Debbie went to bed, James wasn't home, and the children were watching a movie. And my theory is that somebody across the street had something to do with it, because Debbie left the computer room's window open, and their theory is that the criminal or whoever did it got through because that window was open.
But now you would admit, Alana, that this case is so extraordinary, but this is quite a recent case, and I understand you also told me that this case was still open. Now, what do you mean by that?
This case started on October the 5th, and it is still open because they're still investigating what happened. And if you read People magazine, the latest issue has baby Lisa on the cover, so you should check out People magazine, for it will tell you all the things that I have told you about it on that magazine.
Now, that's another classic example of child abuse and neglect. Now, why don't you think in terms of some of the child abuse that you might be familiar with in terms of people at your school? Do you know any young people at your school who look as if they have been abused, and if so, what are some of the characteristics that you find in reference to these children?
Well, there is this one kid at my school. He never really talks. He usually sits on his desk, and when I come over to say hi to him, he's quietly sobbing in his arm. And I noticed on his arm there were blood scratches all down his arm. And I asked him what happened, and he claimed that his dog attacked him. But I really think something is up. So I took him to the guidance counselor, and we're still trying to figure out if he's okay or not.
Again, that's an example of what you're doing at your school. And also, I understand that you've established a bullying club at your school for young people who, because we're saying that not only do parents abuse children, but children abuse children. Is that correct? Say something about that.
Well, bullying is it's commonly child abuse, and parents abuse their children too, so bullying is a part of child abuse. I've seen people get pushed down, people get kicked, people get smacked. I've really seen it all at my school. And I've seen it everywhere. I've seen it on the streets. I've seen people get gunned down, and it's sad to see, because what if they're going through enough things at home? You just got to add to their pain, add to their plate.
Very good. And of course, Lana, we're getting ready for our second commercial break here, and you've given us quite a bit of information about classic child abuse and some of the classic cases in reference to child abuse. And not only that, you've even opened up some cases that are even being investigated today, and giving your theories in reference to it, and et cetera. And I want you to know that we certainly appreciate that. But now, when we come back during this last segment, we're going to have to deal with what we might consider the classic kind of child abuse that you talked about earlier, and then we're going to deal with some of those issues involved. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break.